In the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, I sat down with my friendly neighborhood comic book nerd, Rio Herrera, to discuss getting younglings reading comic books, even if they're not fans of reading traditional books. Since everyone was, and still is, supposed to be practicing social distancing, it was a Zoom video conference, and I was still a novice trying to use it. So please excuse the gnarly echo artifacts that you're going to encounter in this episode. Thank you for listening to Laundry and Other Mysteries, the podcast where we discuss how our guests do their laundry, what their life is like between loads, while offering tips for solving some common and uncommon laundry mysteries to our listeners. I'm your host, Desiree HIckson, also known as the Laundry Diva.
Well, thank you, Desiree, for having me on your podcast. I am Rio Herrera. Um, I am a bona fide comic book nerd, aka reader and enthusiast of the comic book world. Not only do I have a passion for comics since I was a little youngling, but I also have a passion for music, for TV shows, for movies, and most of all, my love of art. I love art. If you can see, I've got art all on my walls. Like every inch of these walls that doesn't have shelf space against it is covered with artwork. This is my comic book room. So I have a dedicated room just for my comics. And I have my studio, which is on the other side of the lower half of the house. And that's where I have the rest of my art collection, which I like to call my gallery. I'm just happy to be here.
So how many comic books do you own, Rio?
Currently sitting at almost 11,000, and I just got rid of roughly maybe 2,000 books when I sold my extras collection.
Right. Wow. I see you have Baby Yoda up there.
Yeah, that's I picked that up for my future grandson.
There you go. So what do you think of that show, Mandalorian? What do you think of that?
I love it. It's very well done. I like the story. It's nice to find out a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff.
Right.
But as well as like seeing that you've got Latinos back in the limelight with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's on Rogue One, but seeing one of the leads as a Mexican actor was like, that's pretty awesome for our community, at least the
right.
Latino community. And so seeing Pedro Pascal as voicing the Mandalorian, like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's always pretty cool. But that's really cool. Okay, so what got you into comic books?
Comic books, I can tell you that a lot of jumping into that world was a lot. Mostly due to uncles, my Uncle Rufino and my Uncle Robert. They would leave their comic books lying around their bedroom when they take off for work. And me and my other younger uncle at the time, and we're like, I don't know, 5, 6 years old, just kind of running through their room because we know they have comics laying all over the place. So like Fantastic Fours, Conan comics, Thors, and one of my favorites was Heavy Metal magazine, because they would have them like the early issues from the
right.
70s, early 70s, early 80s stuff was in there. I mean, at the time, obviously, it's late 70s when I'm discovering heavy metal.
Right.
It was cool to remember in my mind that, like, hey, they were picking up heavy metal when it first released, So that was cool. I mean, and now, here I have issue number 1 of heavy metal. And it took me, this is 20 years later, obviously, but
Wow.
Yeah, but that's number one. So, and then with my collection of heavy metal, I have the first 2 years complete, which for me, those are the most hardest years to complete because magazines aren't always kept in great shape.
Right.
So to find them finally and have them in decent shape was just fantastic for me. But yeah, and then on top of that, Hulk, the comic book Hulk. Back then, my uncles were picking up the Rampaging Hulk, which was in a magazine format.
All right.
So, yeah, huge lover of fantasy and science fiction comics. Got into pretty much everything when I first started collecting. But so aside from being a comic book nerd, I'm also I used to work shows a lot from 2013 all the way through 2018. I worked as a convention floor manager. I hired myself out after the first year, where in that first year I was basically doing like what lawyers like to call pro bono. So I gave my services for free just so that my future employers could see that I had the skill level that they were looking for. I basically brought my military experience for organization to the comic convention scene, and I had a blast. I mean, I let them know after that first year. I was like, hey, these are my rates. If you want to hire me, my services are available. I ended up working about 7 shows a year for the first couple of years. I did help out with Denver Comic Con as a volunteer. They did offer paying positions, but when I sat back and looked at the reality of it, I'm like, you know, I can't get away with making I can't survive off of $13,000 income from a position that requires a lot of legwork and a lot of time behind the computer screen, hustling, you know, promoting, advertising, all that stuff. So I decided not to help them out anymore. On a personal level, I just couldn't touch them anymore. So I stuck with shows that were paying me and taking care of me, and that gave me better, or I guess free reign of the programming for what I was in control of, and also actually controlling the floor, making sure that it ran smoothly. So currently I have given up all the other shows and am still employed and working for the Starfest convention family. I've been with them since 2013. The only year I missed was last year because I started a new job with the railroad, and so that did not allow me the time that I needed to dedicate to Comic Fest, which is the show that I run that's a part of Starfest. Again, Starfest consists of several fests underneath its umbrella, which is that I think right now it's roughly 10 fests underneath the Starfest umbrella. And I only take care of and manage Comic Fest.
Okay.
On social media, it's called Denver Comic Fest, if anybody wants to look it up. But,
all right, awesome. All right, so I still don't know how to word this, but I got to ask you the super special laundry related question. And so, and now I also come from a full disclosure. When Rio started his railroad job, I helped him keep his laundry clean. And so I know I saw a lot of comic book t-shirts. What is your favorite way of storing your, like, any t-shirt or your favorite comic book t-shirts?
Okay, that's funny that you asked me that. People think I'm crazy. Like my friends, my girlfriend, even my kids are like, why does he hang all of his t-shirts?
That does not, I don't think that's crazy, because all of my comic book t-shirts are all hanging up. Even if I don't wear them, they are hanging up. Because you don't want the logo or the decal or the press on to be crunch up or anything. It's got a lace back, so when you put it on, it looks like you're wearing the Superman logo, right? It looks like you're Batman. It's got to look sharp.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the only thing that I consider myself like what they're calling me a diva about my clothing. I put my shirts on hangers, and like I literally probably have 60 plus t-shirts
Right.
in my closet. So yeah, that's my taking care of my shirts method.
See, and that's the perfect way to keep things from wrinkling, especially if you don't do a lot of ironing. If you hang it up right away from the wash from the dryer, then you don't have to worry about wrinkles too much. Especially if it's your favorite shirt.
Of course.
All right, so let's move them along a little bit, and just ask you, like I asked you about like how you got started in comics, and our trajectory is similar. So what kind of comics do you recommend for, say, like first-time readers or kids who really can't stand reading like stickers?
I'll tell you first of all that for the young, especially, I was a voracious reader at a young age. And I came to find out when I was in second and third grade that my teacher was like shocked that I was reading fifth, sixth, and seventh grade level books. As a young kid, books were my escape from the reality. You know, growing up in the ghetto, obviously not the most ideal life for anyone.
Right.
So books were my escape, and so I was at a young age reading Encyclopedia Brown, Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, like all that fun stuff to me. Then I got into pulp heroes, and then fantasy and science fiction, and I was going through books like crazy because like I wanted to be in those worlds. Right. So I think as far as comics, I have to say that I agree with what Stan Lee basically his challenge was that he set out to accomplish when he took over Marvel Comics was to challenge the readers at every age level, not just a young kid picking up a comic book, but young adults and adults that were reading comics at the time. And so by doing so, he said he was going to challenge the reader, and he would put in words that I'd never heard of. So that forced me as a reader to figure out, what does this word mean? You know, I'll give you an example. To say, when I first came across the word extrapolate, I had no clue what that was. So I'm like, wow, I'll go look this up right now. I have a dictionary, you know, and I had the little pocket dictionaries that was all beat up and used over and over. But that was the kind of thing that I thoroughly enjoyed about comic book reading. Not just the fact that I was like diving into this adventure, whether it was a science fiction, a fantasy, an action comic, like the fact that Stan Lee, who was writing at the time for those early books, made it so that he challenged us, the readers, to not just enjoy the adventure, but to learn from it. And of course, once he started diving into the whole, like, let's make the stories more lifelike and realistic to modern day, people, to our lifestyles. And so he did. Peter Parker, Spider-Man is a prime example of that, you know, bringing heartache and hardship, you know, the troubles of a teenager into the comic book world was like, that was it. So for today, I think it's essential that, I think it's great that comic book companies are out there publishing books for all ages. So, for example, back in the 80s, Star Comics, under the banner of Marvel Comics, and Archie Comics, under its own banner, were releasing young reader material. So, like, obviously, no adult topics, no violence, you know, simple, like, childhood adventures, you know, because Star Comics had Chuck Norris and the Karate Commandos, Care Bears. I think they even had He-Man at some point. And then Archie, of course, had Archie and his friends, Jughead Adventures, Betty and Veronica. I mean, those are all cool stuff. You know,
Right.
Heathcliff Comics, Heathcliff the Cat, even Family Circus was something that, while it was only a strip in the newspaper, Family Circus was one of those ideal stories, comic book stories, that people would love to pick up the Sunday paper and read.
Right.
But for today, I'm very proud that the fact that not only Marvel, but all the other publishers, DC, Image, IDW, Boom, they're all releasing comic book material for all ages. So like you can take a 7-year-old and 8-year-old into a comic shop, and I'll tell you right now, I'm very proud of the fact that most comic book shops have a children's section dedicated just for young readers, and it's amazing.
I'm like, oh, all right, but yeah, I love comics. What are your favorite comics, Rio?
I started out honestly with Transformers. These are all in the mid to late 80s when I started collecting full throttle. Obviously, after I was making money on my own or of my own.
Right.
So doing yard work with my godfather in Dallas, and started doing yards on my own so I could make more money. But Transformers was one of the titles I dove into. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, and I think those were the top as far as like mainstream books. I mean, aside from Transformers, which wasn't really mainstream. G.I. Joe was another title, not so mainstream as the hero stuff, but I loved it. Like, it was so cool back then. But I think right now I'm a huge fan of Superman. I always have been. I like Batman too, but Superman is like my hero, you know, especially after watching the movie. You know,
right.
It's brought to life so much for so many of us, you know, kids back then. Like he turned this hero, this alien in a comic, into this superhero on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looks cheesy to us adults, but I mean, I don't care. I've watched Superman, the first movie, probably 100 times.
Right.
The soundtrack, I love the movie. I don't care how cheesy the movie is, but I still love it. It's one of those things, like, it gives me goosebumps when I hear the soundtrack. So I did want to share with you, like, being a convention staffer, I've had the opportunity to meet some of my favorite celebrities from
right.
the 80s. And one of them was the amazing and very shocking Margot Kidder.
Yeah?
I met her a few times. I worked with her when she was a guest, a special guest at Rocky Mountain Con a few years ago. Sadly, she's passed. But I can honestly say that sharing conversation with her as I was taking her to the airport and at the convention was absolutely amazing. Like, just to see someone not be at their table, having to be the star and behave,
right.
you know, for the general public, you know, she got to be herself when we were talking and we were on our way to the airport. And it was, for one, she talked smack about Christopher Reeve. But yeah, no, that was one of those experiences. Well, I'll never forget it. I'll treasure it always. And I'm glad that I'm honored that I actually got Margot Kidder, obviously Lois Lane, Jack O'Halloran, who played Non in Superman 2, and then Mark McClure, who was Jimmy Olsen in all of the Superman movies.
Yeah.
Got to meet those three, and it was just amazing. What an incredible experience each of them were.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. Is there any comic fest coming up or anything in the near future, even virtual or anything?
So as far as I know San Diego Comic-Con went virtual. They've had several virtual panels where they had their celebrity panels set up on Zoom. So they had like 6 to whatever, 9 people in one Zoom conference room, and then they made it visible for the fans to see them. A lot of that material went to YouTube, so if anybody wants to check out San Diego Comic-Con Virtual Con, then you can find everything under their San Diego Comic-Con links under YouTube. Other conventions have started doing the same during I guess, the peak of the pandemic. Now, recently, I've been seeing other states have been kicking up shows, making masks mandatory as well. So my friends in Texas have been attending, I think, half a dozen shows already physically, and they've been doing well. Other states on the East Coast and the West Coast are doing it also. I know for Colorado, there are no shows except for one, and that is Rocky Mountain Con is still going to happen.
Ooh, I can't wait to find out who. All right, Rio, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for sharing. Everybody buy comic books, buy them for yourself, buy them for your kids. And hey, where do you want people to find you on social media?
You can find me on social media. Facebook is Lair of Wonders Productions. It's my fan page dedicated for everybody who's a fan of everything pop culture, music and art. All of that is under that little umbrella that I share with everyone. On Instagram, it's Lair of Wonders, all one word. Tumblr, same thing, Lair of Wonders, all one word. And I think that's it. Instagram, Facebook. I'm also on Twitter under Lair of Wonders. So everything is shared. I try to knock everything out through one platform, and it spreads to the other platforms.
Right.
So everyone can get a piece and see what's being shared, what's popular, what's going down. There are a lot of writers out there. Just to give you a heads up, like in platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and whatever the other few that are out there.
Like Patreon.
Patreon too, huge platform for creators. Those platforms are allowing creators to push out their material where normally they wouldn't be able to, because Diamond and the other distributors have very high demands for a product. For example, I'll just throw a number out there. So if I was a comic book creator, I have a new book, I want to get it out to all the comic shops. Well, not all the comic shops are going to order it because they don't know who I am.
Right.
On the flip side, Diamond asks that I, as a creator, come up with at least 5,000 copies of a book ready to distribute to shops. That's 5,000 books that have to come out of my own pocket.
Wow.
Those platforms, Indiegogo and Kickstarter, allow the creators and their teams to raise the money, and you're pushing the product to people who actually want it. So hence the pledging for the rewards tiers. And like you can't end up with an influx of thousands of extra books, because everybody who's pledged is getting their stuff from you directly. So again, I encourage all of you out there, if you're a comic book fan, art fan, reading in general, there's a lot of great books being published on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and also on Patreon. So take a look, type in comic book, new comic books, projects, whatever, it's there. Lots of great stuff coming out, from the beginning of this year all the way through the end of the year. There's a lot of creators pumping out quality material.
And that's awesome to hear. That's exciting too, because that means that there's still a source of some income for people, especially if they have that talent. But want to thank you one more time for joining me. Thanks for being awesome. Thanks for everything that you do. Thanks for sharing your comic book collection with us. And maybe when things kick off again, if we can get, if Comic Fest starts again or whatever, we can get you back on and we can talk about how that's going to kick off.
I would love that.
All right. No problem, Rio. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later, all right?
Bye.
All right, bye.
Hey, is this thing on? All right. If you're enjoying this podcast and would love to share your own laundry tips and tricks, I would love to hear from you at coloradodiva@gmail.com or visit our Facebook page and leave a comment at Laundry and Other Mysteries. You can even visit the links in the show notes and leave us an old-fashioned voicemail. Go figure. Feel free to come clean about all your laundry issues. I would love to hear from you. In today's episode, Rio touched on the idea of hanging your favorite t-shirts to keep them looking nice for as long as you own them. I'm going to share a quick tip on how you can safely press your favorite t-shirt if it's wrinkled when you finally decide to wear it again. Never, no, never, ever use a hot iron against the decal or logo on your favorite t-shirt. If you have a 100% cotton pillowcase, sheet, or tablecloth, I recommend using that as a shield to cover your shirt and protect it from the hot iron. Then, with the cotton pillowcase over your favorite t-shirt and the iron set to cotton and steam, run the iron across the length of the shirt. You may have to go across the front and the back to get rid of all the wrinkles, but the decal or logo should maintain its shape and adherence, and you'll have a nicely pressed shirt to wear to your next Comic-Con. If you have a laundry question, comment, or concern, send me a voicemail or drop me an email, and you could be featured on the next episode of Laundry and Other Mysteries. Oh, you're still here. Thank you for listening to Laundry and Other Mysteries. Find us on your favorite podcast app and subscribe wherever you are listening to this episode. I'd like to send a shout out to my Patreon patrons with a special shout out to one of my online besties, Auntie M, Headley Westerfield. Thank you for your support, guys. And if you would like to support this podcast and become a regular patron, visit us on patreon.com/Divas Laundry Service. For $5 a month, you can get access to exclusive naked and ad-free content and get a special shout out on a future episode. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. Well, that's it. So be on the lookout for another episode of Laundry and Other Mysteries. But while you're waiting, do me a favor. Keep the suds at bay and put those clothes away.